Hello, and welcome to another DoxTek and OnBase webinar. This session will be recorded and made available on the DoxTek website and sent to you following the webinar. Participants will be put on mute, but if you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them in the chat bar and we'll be sure to answer them. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our Highland partner, Carolyn Kane. She's a product evangelist who specializes in OnBase integrations, and we'd like to turn the time over to her. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and thank you everybody for attending today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about integrations because, as Amanda introduced, I specialize in integrations as a product evangelist, and I just had my 9-year anniversary at Highland, and one of my first products that I began to learn as an evangelist is Application Enabler. And Application Enabler, as we're going to take a look at, is one of our foundational integration platform tools. So that was one of my very, very first tools. And while I do evangelize some other products here, integrations is an area that I spend a lot of time because it's so important for everybody's solutions to make sure that you don't have those information silos. And that's what integrations with OnBase can really help with. So I am going to talk about a lot of things today. I'm going to cover a lot of things, but first, I'd like to do a little bit of a history lesson. And if you are familiar with the history of OnBase, and sometimes we do these little retrospectives where we think about where we've come in the past 26 years, but OnBase was actually built to integrate. And I think a lot of people don't think about it that way because the very first product that was created as part of OnBase was our cold product. So the ability to parse and categorize and index information coming from a mainframe application. So that in and of itself is an integration. We are bringing in information from another system. We are automatically indexing it. And so we are integrated with that system. And I think that we've always had an eye on that idea that OnBase is not the only system in any given architecture. It's not the only solution. It needs to work together with other applications and with other processes and with other solutions. So we've kind of had that vision the whole time. Now, as I said, I became the product evangelist for Application Enabler, but Application Enabler predated me. So I've been here 9 years. Application Enabler is probably at least 13 or 14 years old at this point. It's been around for a little while when I was able to take over. And so we realized that, importing documents from other systems were okay, but a lot of our users wanted to be able to access OnBase functionality from their line of business system without having to leave that screen. And that's what Application Enabler does and enable them to do, is to take any application screen and be able to add that OnBase layer on top of it. So you could double click on the screen, pull information out of that business application and have OnBase go do something. And so that was the first, it's not the first integration, but that was, I think that a breakthrough for us. That was a big area of strength for OnBase. And then we've just continually upgraded and developed our integration tools. And we have a whole suite of integration products. And we're going to go through all of that today. The intention of this presentation is to give you an overview of what's available, what does what, so that as you're looking for your own integration solutions, you know where to go for information to talk about that. All right, so the first is we're going to talk about why are you integrating, which is going to help us lead into the tools and features that will help you solve your problems. And of course, I never end a presentation without telling you where to find more information and where to ask me questions. So that is how we will wrap up. All right, so in your organization, you may have some symptoms of disconnected applications, which said another way basically means reasons you need to integrate with OnBase. And one of those is switching applications. So if you know that some of your users are pulling up two applications, sometimes they might have two monitors and they have one application on one and OnBase is on the other, and they're constantly switching back and forth. I had a customer that I visited a couple of years ago, and they had unfortunately had their OnBase administrator leave, and it had been a few years before they, really started to pick up on their OnBase solution again. And by the time that new system administrator was up to speed, a lot of things had stopped working the way they intended. And so when I was there, I asked them if they used Application Enabler, and they were actually using JD Edwards as their ERP. And they said, we start that up every day, and that's the old AE. You had to actually start it. They're like, we start it up every day, but we don't know what it does. And so I started looking at their process, and one of the things that they were telling me was that they were copying and pasting information out of JD Edwards into OnBase in order to index things. And I asked them, is that ever a problem? Do you ever make mistakes? They said, no, it's fine. It works great. We love it. And I said, well, does anybody ever make a mistake, and then you kind of have a trouble with losing the documents or anything? And they said, well, sometimes when people are training, they mix up these two different types of ID numbers. And they said, oh, but people usually learn. And then I told them that we could actually have AE do the indexing for them with a double click. And they were kind of amazed, and they said that would actually be a lot better than all of this copying and pasting we're doing and the opportunity for mistakes. So that switching back and forth was just really starting to cause some friction, even if they didn't really realize it at the time. So another symptom is when users might have electronic documents that they are trying to get into OnBase, and they're having all kinds of issues with that. So, they have to save that out to their desktop, or they, are going to have to drag and drop that into OnBase, or remember to do that, and then they have to index the document. And as I mentioned in my customer story, Application Enabler can facilitate the indexing, but it also can be sort of a single step to upload documents. You can launch that upload window right from the line of business application, and you can either scan from there, or you can browse out for documents, and it can index in a single step. But that dreaded duplicate data entry is, I think, where integrations are really going to become important, because we have a multitude of different products, but all of them seek to solve the problem of inaccurate data, out of sync data, all of those symptoms of somebody having to actually key in information or even copy and paste information that exists in another system. So anytime we have duplicate data entry, we would really love to keep that data electronic and eliminate the manual steps in order to do that. And of course, data can be out of sync in between those applications. So, if you have to wait for either users to manually input information, or sometimes, we'll run a process, let's say at midnight every night. We'll say, okay, we're going to bring in all the new data at midnight to OnBase, and then, the next night we'll upload all of that new data to JD Edwards or whatever that application is. And, but that means that data is not in sync, maybe 12 hours for updates. It's not too bad, but, users don't ever really trust their data if they know that it's not going to be updated instantaneously. All right, so let's talk about OnBase integration tools and features. And this is my favorite part, because as a product evangelist, we're starting to talk about the products. And this is where I really love to talk about the different solutions that can help your organization. And the first one I love, because everybody on this webinar has these tools that I'm going to talk about. Just the price of entry with OnBase gets you the ability to use autofill keyword sets and keyword data sets that have an external option. So you can call a third-party system to access the most timely data for use with any of the OnBase content, and that's real time. So if somebody who is indexing a document and they're using an external autofill, they'll put in the primary value, and then OnBase goes out and accesses that other system and says, okay, they put in the ID number, let's get back this customer information or this vendor information. And then it pulls that information back. I mean, this is really useful in so many scenarios. So not just when a user enters the value, but also I know a lot of organizations that use some of our intelligent capture products, and they'll capture maybe just a vendor name, but they can go to that other system and they can fill in the rest of the information about that vendor that might not even be present on that document. So it can assist in indexing, it can assist in filling out forms. So there's a lot of different areas where those external autofills are handy. And data sets are important as well, because data sets, you know, keep the options limited, so they don't have to guess, they don't have to try and spell something and know if it's right. So we can actually pull those data sets from another system to make sure those values are the same. And so, so in this diagram, this is I said it's my favorite one because it's kind of entry level integration and everybody has it. So in this diagram, we're going to move up this integration building that we are creating, and as we go, we're going to build in complexity with the products as far as, you know, what it takes to create the integration, and we're also going to build in feature sets. So the native OnBase integration tools are really basic, and as we move through the rest of these products, you'll see that, you know, we get to a point where we can do just about anything with our integrations. Now, our second level 1 product is something I already talked about when I said our very first product was cold. So we have a lot of import processors, and oftentimes I'll ask customers, you know, I'll say, oh, what product are you using? And maybe, let's say from the financial sector, they'll talk about, or credit unions, they'll say, oh, we have this loan origination system. And I'll say, okay, well, is it integrated with OnBase? They say, absolutely, you betcha. So how are they integrating? Well, they're outputting all of their loan documents or their mortgage documents, and then they're using our DIP product to bring those in. And is that an integration? Absolutely, that's an integration, because you're using the data from that system. You're not having to have somebody re-enter any of that, and you're bringing that in an automated fashion. So import processors, they do have their own licensing, so they're not like our autofill keyword sets and keyword data sets, which everybody with OnBase has, but they're a really great way to automate the indexing of documents and connect those systems. All right. Level 2, we actually, so I said that this has been a focus for us for quite some time, and integration really has. We've actually built integration points into our individual OnBase modules. So, you know, workflow has different ways to integrate, and one of the most popular ways is it actually has an action that's called sys call web service. And sys is a system action, and it goes and it calls a web service that is set up for some other application. So that other application has some kind of web service that has been put there so that we can access information in that system. So we'll just call that web service, very commonly used to update another system after something is completed in a process. WorkView has some external data classes as well, so that you can populate the data in WorkView using data from an external system. Web server pops is not so much about the data, but a lot of organizations use web server pops, meaning our doc pop or our folder pop products, in order to create their own custom integrations with an application. So you can use doc pop, and just using the logic that's provided for those links, you can program that into some other application, so that when somebody clicks a link or they click a button in that application, they'll have doc pop serve them up the correct document. Document composition can leverage data from third-party systems. Reporting dashboards can actually, it's really interesting, it can combine data from third-party systems, and it also can show you information from OnBase. So, so it can give you this like holistic view of everything that's happening in a dashboard. It can say, you know, here's your transactions that are happening in your ERP, and here are all of your invoices that are coming into OnBase, and you can see where you are, where you might be falling short, where things might be bottlenecking. So reporting dashboards are pretty cool, the way it can bring all of those worlds together. In Unity Forms, I mentioned the ability to leverage autofill keyword sets, and data sets. It also has the ability to inherit some information from like a portal product. This is very popular in higher education, student portals. When they open the Unity form, we can inherit information from that portal product. So just bringing that all together wherever it makes sense with these products. And so with those, we're sort of creating that single connection between OnBase and those other systems. And I almost think of these as, you know, telephone lines that might be, have to have that physical connection from one to another. As we move up to level 3, we have a lot of purpose-built integrations. So these are integrations that you might have in your organization that say, OnBase integration for Microsoft Outlook. And they're named integrations, and the reason they're a little bit different than building integrations with our integration platform tools is that we've pre-built those integrations to create what we think is the best integration with that application. And we've used their APIs in many, many cases to do that. For Office, of course, we leverage their ability to create an add-in, and then we have multiple integrations with SharePoint. Integrations with ERPs, we are able to use what makes sense for their application in order to create the best integration. Like an example is Workday, which is we should be announcing our certification soon, but we do have an AP automation solution for Workday, and with their integration APIs, you really have to integrate using their APIs. They don't really have a lot of ways you can do it to get around having that certified solution. They want everybody to have, a really solid certified solution. So we've gone through that process with them. Our certification is coming soon. And then there are industry integrations as well. So something like Guidewire in insurance, CityWorks, we see a lot in government. CAD, we actually see in just about every vertical, the ability to work with CAD drawings. So just those different industries and what they might have that are specific. So here's an example of, I mentioned the Outlook integration, and that's a really popular integration. And what we did is we created that add-in that gives us an OnBase toolbar. And we have packed so much OnBase functionality into Outlook that I know a lot of people that never leave Outlook in order to use OnBase. My colleague, Colleen Elber, you may have heard at some events or in other webinars, and she is the evangelist for our email integrations. And this is her primary client that she uses. Now, I happen to use our Unity client more often because I have to use our WorkView applications more often, but she can access everything she needs in OnBase and without leaving Outlook. Then here's another example. I didn't have SAP on the previous list, but that's actually a big integration. It's very popular. And SAP has given us the ability to have an OnBase button. And so this button is on the screens that you would expect as a part of this process. And you can click the button and you can see related documents. And what it's actually doing here is it gives us a list of documents that are associated with that specific record and or transaction. And I only have one document on this list, but it could be a huge list of documents that could be available. And so when we click on that, we see that specific document. And one more example of a purpose-built is Esri. So we have a really great integration with Esri. We can actually take documents in the Unity client and we can send them to an Esri map so that we can get more information about it. A lot of people are using this for sort of some data analysis. Also, it's really important when we're talking about some different industries that might use Esri in order to have their field inspectors go out into the field, or have some service providers go out and into the field, and they're able to access that information from the maps that they're using as a part of their work. And so that was in Unity client. We have the exact same functionality in web. We selected those documents and we can see them on the map as well. And so you can see here, as if I click on this yellow button, or I simulate clicking on this little button, I see the documents that are associated with that area. And here in this one, we just used different applications for employment. So we can see, let's see, who in the maybe greater Pennsylvania area has some experience in certain areas, and then we can get that information. But we have a really big list of purpose-built integrations, and some of those are integrations that are very vertical specific, and some of those are integrations that we'll see across a lot of different verticals. But the best way to get some information about these purpose-built integrations is by heading out to our product communities and checking that out. All right, so we're actually moving up this building pretty quickly, and integration level 4 is application enabler. I did already talk a little bit about that. I can't help myself because application enabler is a fantastic product, but it gives us the ability to create an integration with just about any screen. And so we have those purpose-built integrations, and sometimes somebody will say to me, well, do you have an integration for my ERP or for my application? I don't see it on the list. And just because there's not a purpose-built application for it doesn't mean we don't integrate with it frequently, and we don't have a great integration. But we just use our platforms, our different tools in order to do that. And so with Application Enabler, you can retrieve documents from OnBase, you can facilitate indexing, you can create new workview objects, new DocComp letters, new Unity forms, and then you can actually even manage your processes from there, interact with documents in workflow, and forward a process that is in the middle. So as I said, we have these 3 areas, so you can retrieve so much right out of the box. These are all out of the box options: documents, folders, workview records, medical records. You can index documents, and you can create forms, correspondence, barcode cover sheets, workview records right from that application screen, utilizing the data on this application screen not only to retrieve those documents, but also to minimize the amount of typing that somebody has when indexing or when creating a form. So we have a pretty big list of out-of-the-box AE actions. Basically, whenever anybody says to me, you know what I'd really like to do with Application Enabler, we try to put that in the software. And not just me, you can request enhancements through DoxTek as well. But when somebody says, oh, there's some piece of OnBase functionality that I would like to access, then that indicates to us that we need to put that in the software. That doesn't happen as much anymore. I mean, Application Enabler is now such a solid product that's been around so long. We have most of the functionality that people need right here already. But here's the beauty of Application Enabler. You can get all of that just by clicking on the screen or by using a keyboard shortcut. Or, I like to put in a little footnote, Application Enabler can also be programmatically integrated with another system. So basically, Application Enabler can be called via a hyperlink. But that hyperlink can be used to embed a button in the interface or an actual hyperlink in that application. And then you can have Application Enabler execute all of those things that I had on that list just by clicking a button or by using a hyperlink. All right, so as I mentioned, I just want to reiterate that I said I was moving up in complexity. So it takes a little bit of knowledge to integrate with Application Enabler. It takes a little more knowledge to use web services publishing, which is actually point and click configurable. So you don't need to necessarily have a lot of information about web services, but there is a little bit more complexity because it does involve installing those web services on a web server running IIS, and there could be some other considerations. But web services publishing is pretty cool because they are point and click configurable SOAP or REST web services that can be consumed by another application. Now those are sort of a single directional integration. So it's always that other system calling OnBase. Sometimes it's retrieving information from OnBase, or sometimes it'll be pushing information. But Enterprise Integration Server is when you want to have that bi-directional data or document exchange between both systems. It facilitates that communication between the systems. And EIS and Web Services Publishing are actually built on the exact same platform. So when one gets an enhancement, the other one gets one too. And there's just a few differences between them. So as I said, when we have the business system going to OnBase, Web Services Publishing is a great tool, but EIS also can do all of those same things. So it can, from the business system, it can update autofill keyword sets or keywords, or it can execute a custom query against OnBase. It can import essentially import documents into OnBase, transfer documents to OnBase, create forms, execute a Unity script. All of these things are available from that business system to trigger. So somebody does something in that system. Frequently, I think we have examples from like a PeopleSoft where somebody might update some employee information, and we want that data to be reflected in OnBase. So upon updating that information, we call out to OnBase and say this information has changed. So all of that is available with both EIS and Web Services Publishing. But Enterprise Integration Server is the only product that has that other direction. So we can use EIS to update a business application. If something changes in OnBase, or with scan queue information to keep that system updated and what's happening in a scan queue, or with a workflow action for workflow to, as a part of a process, you know, call it EIS to do something with the other system. So we build a lot of common integrations using these tools, using Application Enabler and using either Web Services Publishing or EIS. You'll see a lot of things on the list here: JD Edwards, Oracle E-Business Suite, Lawson, Dynamics. So we use these tools in order to create an integration with those applications. And I don't want to leave out APIs, although usually, you know, it's not something we spend a lot of time on, because you do have to be API certified, or, you know, you use your services in order to create these APIs. And so that's just kind of the sky's the limit. When you're using APIs, you can do just about anything you want. But obviously, flying a helicopter is not an easy job. So when I say we move up in complexity, that helicopter is going to be the most difficult thing that you have to do. So, so you do have to have somebody who's a specialist in that in order to use our APIs. Okay, so that is everything that you can do to integrate with OnBase in 25 minutes, which definitely means you have possibly a few questions. You definitely have some needs as you go through all these products to go out and get some more information. So, so you can either ask your questions right now while I'm here, or you can also go out to our product communities at onbase.com/community. Make sure that you have an account for that if you don't already, and you can ask all of your product-related questions. You can talk to different people who are in your industry or who have solved the same problems that you have before and get advice from them, and that is some of the best value that community gives you. And I'm out there as well, so I will be out there answering any questions about Application Enabler, EIS, Web Services Publishing, and more. So did we have any questions that came up from the folks in the crowd?
Carolyn, we had one question. Do we have a Gmail integration?
So that's a really good question. We don't have a Gmail integration like what I showed with Outlook. You know, there are a few different places where OnBase can interact with Gmail, and I don't know all of those off the top of my head. But I would say that, you know, when you're talking Gmail integration, you're probably thinking of what we have with Outlook, and we really don't have that. But there are some areas in which OnBase can interact with Gmail. That's something that, you know, we are continually looking at up until. I would say up until recently, but I think it's an ongoing challenge, is just accessing or having access to the tools in order to do that. And that's something that, you know, Gmail has to create or has to keep consistent so that we can do that. So that's been a challenge with that, is just, you know, they are not really easy to integrate with. Not as easy as, you know, Microsoft with Word and with Outlook, you know, provided us a really easy way to create that integration.
All right, thank you. I don't have any other questions at this time.
All right, well, thank you, Carolyn, and we'd like to thank all of you that were able to attend. And if you have any questions about what was discussed today, don't hesitate to reach out to DoxTek or OnBase on the community page. And thank you for all attending, and have a great day.